You're listening to the Active Mom Podcast with host Dr. Carrie Pagliano. I'm a mom, physical therapist, and your go-to guide for staying active with pelvic health issues in pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause, and beyond. Whether you're a fellow mom, physical therapist, or women's health professional, join me where I'll share expert insights, real-life stories, and the latest research to help you approach running, CrossFit, yoga, Pilates, HIIT, or whatever activity you love with confidence and evidence-informed guidance. Let's start the show. So every once in a while, I'll get an email and say, hey, I would love to be on your show. And I got an email from Cristina, and she's like, so I've kind of done some things and I'd really love to talk about it. And, and they were really cool things, like just finishing the Javelina, 100K, like that's not a small thing for those of you that don't know Ultra World. It's kind of a small little race where they run really far in a really hot land. And so Cristina Snyder, she's a mom, she's a former nurse, and a marathoner and ultra runner, and wanted to come on and share her stories. So Cristina Snyder, welcome to the Active Mom Postpartum Podcast.
Hi, Carrie. Thanks for having me.
All right. So when we hopped on, you shared a little bit about kind of your experience with the podcast. Do you mind just kind of going back on that real quick so people know where you're coming from?
Okay, so I had a pretty disastrous first pregnancy. I got pregnant March of 2020.
Oh, sorry.
Working as a nurse in a hospital. And at that time, my husband was also working at a hospital as a doctor. So it was my first pregnancy. I didn't know what to expect. I just kind of ran to manage my stress and anxiety levels. And I welcomed our first son in December 2020. And then second pregnancy, I decided I wanted to do things a little bit more informed. I wasn't just in survival mode.
Right.
So I started listening to your podcast. I think I started listening maybe in 2021 or 22. But I guess you don't really know what you don't know that
Yes.
first time around. So I started listening to your podcast, and that first delivery, I had run and I was active, but I was told I had a tight pelvic floor. So as runners and weightlifters, we can, kind of end up on that tight end of the spectrum as far as pelvic floors. And so my second pregnancy, I really wanted to prioritize pelvic floor mobilization. And so I learned a lot about that through your podcast. And I had worked with a pelvic PT postpartum to address some I guess constipation problems also related to pelvic floor.
Yep.
But luckily, that first pregnancy, I didn't have really any other complications. So I loved hearing stories from other athletic women and other specialists in your field. And I really took that time, the second pregnancy, to stop running in the second trimester and focus on hip mobilization and relaxation for the third trimester.
Yeah.
So that was the most helpful.
I love sometimes just hearing people's stories, because I think, especially kind of just being in my field so much, we get our head in the sand a little bit and we forget about the things that we once knew. So if you go back and think about even just thinking about getting pregnant, not the fact that you happened to get pregnant at the very beginning of global pandemic. Anytime anybody says March 2020, I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like, it was so bad. Like, when you were even thinking about getting pregnant, you're a runner at that point. Like, what are the things that you're even thinking to Google? Like, are you talking to your friends? Are you Googling? Are you carefree and not worrying about it? Like, do you remember what your mindset was back then?
It was just day-to-day survival, because I immediately was hit with the nausea.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like throwing up at work in my mask, dehydrated, not being able to eat. I had even thrown up in my patient's toilet one time. Like,
Nice.
it was horrific. And they were worried about me,
Of
and
course.
then I was a cardiovascular nurse, so I was taking care of people like after surgery.
Yeah.
and they were concerned about me. So that
Yeah.
was really bad. And so I used up like a lot of my sick leave.
Mm-hmm.
I was just trying to hold fluids down.
Mm-hmm.
I really wasn't on my phone a whole lot that first trimester. And then second trimester, I felt better. I was able to work more. And I knew about stretching as a runner, but I
Mm-hmm.
didn't understand like the range of motion that our hips need to be able to do to give birth. And that wasn't
Yeah.
until, I didn't learn about that till after delivery, unfortunately. So I
Yeah.
really wasn't, I was learning about the baby and how to
Right.
survive pregnancy.
Yes.
And then I just figured I would figure out the pelvic stuff afterwards.
Later, yeah. When you were
Yeah.
thinking about, like, even when you were thinking, okay, maybe someday I'd like to have a kid, but I'm a runner. Like what did every day kind of like running training look like for you? How much strength training were you doing, flexibility, that kind of stuff? Like what was kind of normal for you? And then when you were even thinking about getting pregnant, was there an idea that you needed to do anything different, or was it all just kind of like baby focused even pre getting pregnant?
Yeah, I think it was all baby focus even before getting pregnant. And then um, I think I just saw some recommendations to keep heart rate below 140,
Right.
but I had been a nurse long enough and I had seen people do
Right.
some pretty crazy, amazing things. And so I think working 12-hour night shifts, I had to be flexible with my training plans.
Mhm.
So I had actually started to run a marathon in all 50 states in college because I had a professor that was doing that.
It's a
So
great
at
inspiration. Hey,
19,
you're doing it. I'll do it too. Why not?
so I was taking a bunch of classes with labs, and then
Mhm.
I needed like a couple extra courses, or just one extra course really, to bump me up to like full-time
Mhm.
status as a student. So I took a marathon training course.
Oh, interesting.
So I did that, and the professor was running a marathon in all 50 states. So that's when it first entered my mind at 19. So that was 2012.
This has been a
Yeah,
long journey. So what do you I've never heard of this
2012 was my
before.
first
What do
marathon.
you
Yeah.
learn in a marathon training course? And granted, I'm
Yeah.
and you know how much has changed obviously in how we understand marathons. Like, do you remember kind of what you learned in that class?
Oh yeah, it was like it was accelerated. It was
Yeah.
he talked about everything that we're talking about now, basically.
Oh,
Yeah, it
interesting.
was fantastic. He brought in a sack of gels. We all had gels on our training
What?
runs. It was fantastic. But
That's so
he was a
cool.
psychology professor who just signed up to teach this class. He was like, "Hey, this is what I'm doing. You guys want to come join me,
Yeah.
run a marathon in the Kentucky Derby? Come." We just like all carpooled and stayed at a hotel together.
That's amazing.
So it was amazing. Yeah.
Because
And then
like,
we moved states.
yeah.
So then, even working as a nurse full time, night shift, I'd get up on a Friday, drive to another state, run a marathon, drive home.
Because
And,
you could.
working
I
three
love
12-hour shifts.
that. This is where I'm sitting here
Yep.
and like there's this mental judgment going on in the back of my head of like, wow, physically she's incredibly blessed that her body can handle this. But also I think it's if you can do 12-hour shifts, of course you can do ultras, of course you can do marathons. Like that's I
Yeah,
can't
it
do
hurt a little
that.
bit. Yeah.
So already I'm like,
It was
okay,
fun. Yeah.
bowing down, you can do that.
And I never really had time goals. I think that's the big thing. When you have
Mhm.
a goal of 50 marathons,
It's just
you're like,
finishing.
I'm going to have fun. I'm going to take
Yeah,
pictures. I would say that I'm a tourist first and a runner second.
I like that.
So I
I like
run
that.
when I didn't work, or if we had like a truly horrible shift
Mhm.
and I was all amped up. Sometimes I would have to run in the morning after a shift
Gotcha.
just to wind down. Now,
Yeah.
especially if you're jacked up on caffeine or
Right.
adrenaline.
Right. So that was your way to kind of calm down then. Yeah.
So I was
We did.
never super rigid as a runner.
Yeah.
I was always very flexible, and I think that's what helped me cope with the changes of pregnancy
Yeah.
and postpartum because I always just kind of did what I wanted anyways.
Yeah. Had you done much strength training? Because I know like 20 somethings who are runners, definitely it's like, yeah, it's all about the run. Had you shifted over and done some degree of strength training, or was it mostly running still?
So I had done track and cross country in high school, and
Hmm.
they required that varsity runners take a strength training class.
Nice.
So I knew how to lift, and I had done powerlifting in high school.
Yeah.
And so it was definitely on the back burner while I was, pre-baby, just kind
Hmm.
of running to blow off steam.
Yep.
And then I don't think it was brought to my attention. I was doing like back squats,
Okay.
I
But it
would
was
say.
something. It was
Yes, I was doing
something.
something,
Yeah.
and but that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to just go out and run.
Well, and that's where, I mean, I'm gonna have, I've been thinking about this. I'm gonna have to have an episode with, I went to two different high schools. I switched high schools my sophomore year, or no, I guess it was my junior year. And my second cross country running coach was also my Nordic ski coach. He wasn't my track coach, he was the guys' track coach, but like he made sure, like we were doing plyometrics in like the early 90s. We were doing like visualization training, like all this crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And props to our cross country coaches that went the extra mile and figured out all this stuff before other people did, because how else would we? And that's where I feel like we're kind of ahead a little bit, because that wasn't it was not weird for us, to do strength training. I remember the first time I picked up a barbell. I'm pretty sure it was either in cross country or Nordic ski training, and like either the conditions were bad or something. So I'm sure there was like some reason that we were doing it, but doing a bench press, like I felt kind of badass with that barbell. So yeah, I swear I'm gonna have to get some of my old team together. My old coach, since he retired a couple of years ago, but they give us so much. It just comes back later. It's
You're
the
like,
gift that
wow,
keeps on
they
giving.
knew what they were
Yes,
talking about.
right. And you can't. I mean, so okay. Random
So I
question.
have a great foundation of like strength training that now
Yeah,
I'm finally
you're
appreciating.
coming
And I
back
look
to,
around
yeah,
at like the personal trainers and I'm like, wow, like I don't have to be the person
yeah,
who's terrified to walk into a gym.
right. Now, random question: was your track coach also the football coach?
No.
Ah,
So
okay. Because that
my
was my experience. Both my track coaches were and I think they had to fill out, they were trying to find them another sport to fill out their extracurricular paycheck. And so we always ended up with a football coach. So the football coach with pubescent girls, I always think is such a bad idea.
yeah, now that you think about it, yeah. So the women's cross country coach
Hmm.
and volleyball coach was married to a football and powerlifting coach. So
Okay.
I did
That could work.
powerlifting as a season. That was like my winter season. I did
Ah,
competed in
that's
powerlifting.
awesome. So I'm sure your track season was pretty badass then
It
if
was
you were
pretty good, but
all,
I was also
yeah.
very fatigued.
Well, I mean, anytime you
Like
switch
they wouldn't
sports,
line up like the
yeah,
squat max day with the races. So that was kind of rough.
yeah. Yeah, no, I remember we would go, my first high school we went, I did cross country running and then swimming and then track. And so to go from cross country running, even though we're in like peak form, you throw us in the pool and those first couple weeks they'd make us do like 4,000 yards. And I couldn't even lift my arms. I'm like, this is horrible. I'm so out of breath. I'm
Wow.
so like, and it's just a completely different sport. So bad. So bad. All right, so let's get back that little walk down memory lane in high school. Okay, you get through the nausea. You're getting, to second, third trimester, your first pregnancy. Like, is there any sense at this point that you need to do much different? Like, and again, like, where did you start to search for any information, or did you feel like you needed to at that point?
So I did kind of understand electrolytes
Hmm.
relating to cramping quite a
Yep.
bit. And that was my biggest issue the first pregnancy was my calves were always cramping
Oh yes.
and I could never figure out why.
Yep.
So I would say running became a lot less fun. It was a lot less of a priority in my life.
Hmm.
And so I stopped running I would say the beginning of the third trimester. It was
Mhm.
no longer a priority.
Yep.
And I'm trying to think. 2020, my gym was closed. So
Right.
I was
Right.
pregnant, working at a hospital, and I had a couple dumbbells here and there.
Mhm.
I did some stuff like calf raises. I thought,
Mhm.
okay, maybe my calves are tight. I'll do
Yep.
some calf raises. And I would get these leg cramps middle of the night,
Yep. I remember
even
those.
during a bath. And I did, I took magnesium supplements, I foam rolled, I did all the things, and they were just
Yep.
horrible. So I also had heartburn.
Oh,
So it was just not a good time.
yeah.
And I want to say I did some simple just back or dumbbell squats.
Yep.
And that was pretty much the extent of it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until postpartum that I started meeting with a pelvic floor PT, and she did a return to running evaluation.
Mhm.
So she specialized in running
You can give her a
and
shout out,
pelvic
by the
floor.
way.
So she is at Peak Endurance in Madison, Wisconsin.
Oh, who is
Yeah.
that?
So there's
I know this.
Jennifer. I work with Jennifer quite a
Yep.
bit, but she's more on the lifting side.
Yep. When did you know in postpartum or even like, while you were still pregnant, kind of approaching delivery, did you have a sense of what you wanted postpartum to look like, how quickly you were going to be able to run? And then when you got on the other side, did that timeline change at all? And what made you seek out a PT?
Yes, it really wasn't a priority for me to run because I was going to be delivering in December in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, I could take it or leave it. It's fine.
Yeah.
Um, so I mostly just did walks.
Hmm.
I did have one small tear and that healed fine. But I was having trouble with constipation,
Mm.
and I know I had had back labor, so that wasn't very fun either.
No.
So I knew there was something going on with my pelvic floor. I thought it was normal,
Hmm.
but the constipation then led into like incontinence.
Mm.
So then I went to go see a pelvic floor through my insurance, a pelvic
Hmm.
floor PT through my insurance, and she helped me out immensely. And then later, when I wanted to get back into running, I felt okay, but I knew I should probably start with the weightlifting
Yeah.
before I got into the running. So that's when I started working with um, just a physical therapist at Peak Endurance, and she helped
Hmm.
me. Uh, I want to. When was this? Maybe like 5 months postpartum. I
Yeah.
said I want to be able to do bench again. I want to be able to squat.
Yeah.
I want to be able to deadlift. And then she had me start doing stuff on a single leg. She's like, eventually, when you get back into running, you're going to be able to need to do this stuff too.
Yeah. No,
So
definitely.
luckily, no like pelvic floor stuff. Although in the back of my mind, I knew, okay, next pregnancy, I'm gonna really need to work on
Right.
opening my
You
pelvic
got to do
floor.
something there. How did you even figure out? Like, did you go to your GYN or your OB and say, "Hey, I'm having these issues," and they said, go see a pelvic floor PT? Like, how did even a pelvic floor PT become part of your vocabulary?
So yes, I did go. I think it was my 6 week appointment, and I said, hey, I'm having trouble with incontinence.
Hmm.
And so right off the bat, they were like, okay, go see this PT. So I did, and she was fantastic, but she couldn't give me any recommendations about running because that
Yeah.
was not her area.
Yep.
So I said, that's fine. I'm not interested in running right now.
Well, I mean, so on the bright side,
Yeah.
like, that worked out for you.
Dead of
Um,
winter. I'm not really into it.
do you Nordic ski up there or no?
I don't. No. I'm originally from like the El Paso, Texas area.
Oh, so you wouldn't have, yeah. Oh my
And then I
gosh.
moved to Kansas and then I moved to Wisconsin.
You just keep
So
moving north.
yeah, it's
You
all
might have
very
to
new.
ski.
Yeah.
I'm in the process of trying to find every possible person that Nordic skis in the pregnancy postpartum space, and we're joking that we're going to have a get together where we just all get together and we cross country ski and talk about pelvises. So you,
Yeah,
if you
it's
want
really
to,
big
if you
here.
want
The
to, it
birthdays up
is,
here,
it
it's a
is.
big
Yeah.
deal.
That's why I was surprised. I was like, really? No.
Maybe later when my kids are older.
Honestly, though, like let them learn early. I didn't learn till I was in high school, but I learned to Nordic ski before I did downhill. But it's such a great full body workout, nice low impact. Your glutes and your lats and your abs will be like bomb. So yes, this is my invitation to you to welcome welcome you to the Nordic side of things for sure. Um, so your pelvic floor PT, she's like, hey, I don't do running. Was she able to say, hey, I know somebody who does, or were you kind of like left to Google stock?
Yeah, so I immediately went to Instagram and I
Because that's where
found
all
the
good medical information comes from.
yes. And I kind of wanted to see, how much of this will clear up on its own, right? So my
Yeah.
priority was the incontinence. I'm like, okay, I need to get that figured out before I even go outside.
So what do you search? Like what's like I can't put my head ever back in a normal head again where I don't know these things. So like what is that? Do you look incontinence on Instagram? Like what do you look for?
I think I had looked for like return to running strength
Hmm.
programs or something like
Okay.
that. And then a couple podcasts and some accounts came up, and I started listening to your podcast, and then I just started looking in just Apple Maps to find an
Mm.
office near me
Hmm.
because I said, well, I don't know if they're gonna want to see me in person or what.
Right.
But I had an office like 5 miles away.
That's
So I
awesome.
just booked an appointment and I went to go get seen, and I had lost a lot of muscle mass.
Yeah. And this was just a regular running PT, or were they like postpartum specific?
They were not postpartum specific, but they had someone because I think at that point I was like 5 months postpartum,
Hmm.
and she helped me improve my form with lifting so that I
Gotcha.
could build the strength.
I gotcha.
Because and I think she had just taken a look at my diastasis,
Hmm.
and it was maybe only like two finger widths apart at that point,
Hmm.
5 months postpartum. And I didn't have any back pain. I didn't have any pelvic pain. I just knew I felt weaker.
Yeah. I
And so
think
I
that's,
really just wanted to make sure my form was, I felt like all out of whack. Like
yeah.
didn't know if my form was correct with any kind of
Yep.
lifting movements. And running felt okay. I just wasn't sleeping much and it wasn't a priority.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think all those
Yeah.
sorts of things are really typical postpartum, but you don't know when you should ask for help and how. And I typically, you can kind of get a sense talking to people. When I have a mom that's asking me at like 2 or 3 weeks postpartum when they can start to run, what that says to me is one of two things. Either they're in a really stressful situation and this is their stress management and this is what they need to do, or somebody's going to die, or their kid is sleeping, their kid is eating, they
Hmm.
have a lot of help, and they're feeling physically pretty good and didn't have a particularly traumatic birth. Because
That's right.
it sounds like you weren't sleeping, so you're like, no, this is not. And that was similar to me. Like that was I had a patient yesterday. She asked me like, oh, were you exercising during pregnancy and early postpartum? I'm like, well, number one, no, because my kids are older. My oldest is about to turn 14. That wasn't societal expectations at that point. That wasn't our culture at that point. And two, he didn't sleep till he was 5. So no, that was not a priority
Oh
at that
gosh, yeah.
point.
And I was doing the neighborhood walks and they were
Hmm.
up to like 4 miles.
Yeah, so you were doing
But I
that
think it depends on the season that your kid is born. Because if you are
very
logging
much.
onto Strava or
Yep.
Facebook at all,
Hmm.
and you see your friends that you used to run with, because I had a
Yes.
group of friends I used to run with, and they're still around for me, which is
Hmm.
fantastic. But I could see them signing up for races, doing the
Yeah.
group runs. In the dead of winter in Wisconsin, we aren't doing those things.
You guys
People
don't do
are
that.
skiing, they're
Right.
snowshoeing, they're riding their fat tire bikes, or they're
Yeah.
weightlifting. And for me right now, I love weightlifting in the winter. This is
Gotcha.
my off season is I do heavy weightlifting now because I learned the importance of it during pregnancy and
Yeah.
postpartum.
I was just thinking about
Yeah.
seasonality the other day. And I think where you live, it very much is imposed upon you. Where I grew up is very imposed on me. Like when it's winter, you do other things. We didn't run in the snow, we skied, or I did some other sport. Here, just to give you in DC, like this morning it was 35. 2 days ago it was 80. Like it's very confusing, and continues to be more so. So I might have a whole winter where it doesn't snow at all and it's very temperate, 45, something like that. The coldest it might get is the 20s. Or we might have 4 or 5 different storms and we can't get out and it's super icy here or freezing rain or things like that. But everybody runs all year round here. And I was like, I got to stop doing that because
Yeah, no.
it just and I feel the pressure to keep doing it. I need to back up. I've got a little tweak in a hip right now. And I was like, I need to back up and get back to that seasonality because like you said, you're like, hey, I'm going to do my strength training and that's going to pay off come springtime for sure.
Yeah, or your sprint intervals on a treadmill, but
Yeah.
not like crazy long runs.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's for sure. That's for sure. Okay. So it sounds like a little bit later getting back to running. Fast forward, you are thinking about getting pregnant again. In that meantime, had you completed any postpartum marathons or races or things like that?
Yeah, so I would say immediately, I want to say like 1 month postpartum. I had already completed over 30 marathons at that point.
Mhm.
I had already been running them for 10 years. So
Yeah.
I knew for like the more desirable races, like
Yeah.
Mount Hood in
Yeah.
Oregon, I would need to sign up early because they'll
Yeah.
sell out. So I signed up for Mount Hood 50K in Oregon, 1 month postpartum. And I looked at the elevation map and I saw that there was 2 miles that were uphill.
Yes.
So I said, okay, great, I'll do strength training.
What was the
This
elevation
is my
gain on the
entrance, right?
yeah.
I don't remember
Do
the
you remember?
exact elevation gain. I want to say like 3 or 4,000. It wasn't crazy. It
Was
wasn't
it
like
on part of the
straight up.
PCT or no?
No, I don't
No,
think
okay.
so. It was just like around
Just around it.
the
Yeah.
base of Mount
Okay,
Hood.
gotcha. Okay.
So some parts were going up. And
Mhm.
I saw that there was like a very generous time cutoff. So I said, okay,
Always something
I'm
to
gonna hike
look
it.
for.
That's fine. I'll hike it.
Love it.
So I flew out there with my husband and my 7-month-old,
Oh my
and
gosh.
I ran a 50K, I want to say in like 6 hours and 30 minutes or six
Okay.
hours. And it was just beautiful. And I wanted something to look forward to.
Yeah. A lot of people do that. I
Hmm.
have a lot of friends that will sign up for that race early on, to have something to look forward to. And then even when your kids are, toddler age, just moms do a much better job of, I think, prioritizing themselves when they have something on the calendar. Would you agree?
Yes. Yeah. And I was able to relax about it because I thought if I have a solid foundation of
Right.
strength,
Yep.
then I like a month or two before I can throw
Yeah.
in some long runs and I can be ready. And it's a soft surface. It's a trail race,
Yeah.
fully supported with aid stations. I can breastfeed if I need
Mhm.
to, or I can drop if I need to. I took it slow and I knew that I would get dehydrated a lot faster because I was breastfeeding. But my goal is always just to be able to run another day.
Right.
So I took
Right.
it easy. I met up with some friends out there from other states and
Nice mom trip.
we ran. Yes, we did.
All right, so we fast
We did.
forward, you decide to get pregnant again. Usually second time around, moms decide to do things a little bit differently, and they're also forced to a little bit because you have a small little, human that also requires your attention. So how did that, second pregnancy go?
Well, the baby fever hit and it hit very hard. I had done a second postpartum marathon.
Mhm.
It was another 50K in Oklahoma. And then after that one, I said, I want to have another baby immediately, right
Mm,
now. And it wasn't happening. So I think
mm,
3 cycles in, I messaged a registered dietitian who specialized in runners, and I did see her on Instagram.
Oh, who
And I
was that?
can, yeah. So I want to say her Instagram name is the running dietitian, but it used
Oh,
to
yeah.
be Applesauce Amy.
Oh, I didn't know
Yes,
that.
applesauce. So
Okay.
she is all for, fueling on whatever you have in your
Yeah.
house, but fueling yourself properly.
Right.
So I said, hey, I'm a runner. I would like to get pregnant. I'm having trouble with eating enough because I think after I stopped breastfeeding, my appetite tanked
Yep.
and nothing sounded appealing. And
And
she said, you know
corners of
what?
grilled cheese don't cut it either.
Yeah. So she was like, I'm always eating my kids' applesauce on the run because it's something that they would enjoy,
Right.
if they're in the stroller, or I could eat it too.
Yep.
And so that really resonated with me. And to have another mother runner tell you, listen, if you really want to get pregnant and you're trying to sort out the food situation right now, let's just start by cutting back on the running.
Yeah.
Coming from someone who understands the passion for it,
Yep.
it hit home.
Yeah.
So I said, okay. So I cut back on the running. And at that time, I had a raging toddler. So I wanted to get him outside. I wanted to run him to the park
Yeah.
and all that. But I said, okay, let's prioritize the pregnancy at this point. So I
Yeah.
worked with her for a couple months. She just had me take pictures of my food. And then she would say, like, okay, so what's the deal with the spacing of these meals? Like the spacing is too far apart. Or I think as a cardiovascular nurse, unfortunately, after educating hundreds of patients on the Mediterranean diet, post surgery, I had it drilled into my head. You want to consume low fat, low
Right.
sodium, these types of foods. And I had kind of internalized that.
Yep.
But I had to remind myself, like, you are not someone with a heart condition.
Yeah.
You are someone who needs the extra
Yeah.
everything.
I think that's such an important point where we have to look at where we get our stories that we tell ourselves about food.
The food rules that you don't even
Yeah,
realize you have.
exactly. And they're just, I mean, even it can be as simple as, learning the stupid pyramid that they've changed 17,000 times when you were a kid. If you're, my vintage and you grew up where they're like, there's dieting everywhere and everything should be low fat, low salt, low whatever, everything gets demonized. And so, and I think even now, just even understanding why that's so important, we're just now having, conversations talking about relative energy deficiency in pregnancy, postpartum, much less, the pubescent athlete and all that kind of stuff. I just feel like the last couple of years, we've been having those conversations about, hey, this is why you need to eat. And moms really have kind of in your situation, like if you're not getting pregnant, not realizing that your body's trying to tell you you need to eat more, and because you're under fueling and you're over exercising. And so no, I'm not going to procreate at this point because you're in survival mode. Like I think those moms, especially like yourself, like you understand that, but you didn't realize what was going on. Like you're like, okay, I get it, I'm trying to do this, but didn't realize that maybe you were under fueling, didn't realize that you were over exercising.
Yes, and I was, 28 at the time, so I didn't feel a ton of pressure as far as like the age,
Right.
my age, and I thought, well, I've only been trying a couple times, but it would be good to have another pair of eyes on what I'm eating
Yep.
because I know my body was reacting really strongly to my toddler. Like he was getting into all this stuff, he was
Yeah.
falling off the couch, and I would have these little pangs of like adrenaline. And then
Mm,
I thought, okay, well, I have all these little pangs of like, I'm falling down the slide, but really it's him.
yeah.
And so I could feel my body, I would sweat. And, first time mom, you don't want to see your kid fall, but they fall so many times a day.
They do.
So I didn't
They
know if it
do.
was really like that aspect of it or
Mhm.
not eating enough because
Yeah.
I still wanted to take that adrenaline that my toddler was having my body produce
Yeah.
and go for a run, but I wasn't possibly eating enough. to
Right.
support all of
To
it.
be able to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think having her set her eyes on everything that I was eating was super helpful,
Mm-hmm.
and she helped me incorporate more processed foods into my life so that I could support the activity I was doing.
Yeah.
And then I think it took me 6 months to get pregnant, which isn't horrible.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're in the thick of it and taking 50
It feels
pregnancy
like
tests,
forever, and
yeah,
everyone around you is pregnant and not you. Yep, been
I
there.
know, and you're wanting to take all the pregnancy tests and
Yeah.
yeah, so I did actually get pregnant while I was working with her because I had signed a contract
Mm-hmm.
for like a set amount of time to work with her. And so she coached me through the first trimester of
Mm,
pregnancy, which was very helpful.
that's awesome.
And then this time around, I contacted Peak Endurance,
Mm-hmm.
the physical therapist, and I started working with a pelvic floor PT during my pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I had kind of done the research and I had reached out postpartum. And
Yeah.
then I said, let's just get them on board immediately. So the
No, and
second
it
pregnancy, I felt went a lot better.
yeah. No, and I feel like there's so much to be said for second time around anyway. It's like it's not exactly a do-over, but you just I think you have more of an understanding of things that maybe you prioritize a little bit more that you just didn't have any idea about the first time around. So fast forward to postpartum, what did your second postpartum look like? And how old are your kids right now? They're
One and well, it's 18 months,
yeah.
and my oldest will be 4
Yeah,
in
so you're in
December.
the thick of it.
Yeah.
You're in the
So
thick
yeah,
of
I
it.
had a PT on board. I had a registered
Nice.
dietitian on board. It was
That's the
fantastic.
dream team.
It is.
That's the dream team.
So I felt horrible the first trimester and this second pregnancy, but second trimester, I got a couple long runs in
Nice.
and I signed up for a marathon.
Of course you did.
Yeah. So I ran a marathon at 26 weeks pregnant.
Oh my goodness. You must have been
And
feeling pretty good then.
I felt really good and I said, "You know what? If I wake up that day and I don't feel well, I just
Mhm.
won't do it. It's
Yeah.
fine." I picked a race, but I said I can also take it or leave it. I can walk away.
Yeah.
So
I
I
see
did it and it was okay. It was
I
fine. I
see
didn't have any other
far
cramps.
far more people doing that now. There's a couple Facebook groups that I'm on where people are like, "Oh, hey, I'm training for this and found out I'm pregnant. I'm going to be X many weeks." And everybody's always looking for the answer, like, "Am I going to be able to do it?" And I love your answer of, "If I wake up that morning and I feel like I can try, I'll try. If I wake up that morning," because you can't control what you're going to feel
Yeah.
like. Not at all. Not at all. Okay,
And
so
I
you got
know
through. Go ahead.
yeah, yeah, and I know that it takes a little bit longer to warm up
Yep.
during pregnancy. So I said, I'll get to the starting line
Yeah.
and then I'll warm up during the race.
Mhm.
And then if I don't feel good at any point, I'll stop and that's fine.
How was the pee situation? Did you feel like you had to pee the whole time or not so much?
So luckily the race was a looped course. It was like
Oh,
one and a
nice.
half miles and there was a bathroom there as long with the food.
Mhm.
So I was able to take my own nutrition and then also have whatever they had.
Mhm.
But there were times where I would pee every mile and a half, and there were times where I felt fine and I didn't have to.
Mhm.
But I also took that as a sign of, okay, I'm hydrating well enough.
Right.
So I wasn't super upset about it. I did feel like I had to pee the whole time.
Yep.
Um, but mentally, I was able to override that.
Yeah.
But also, I wasn't going for a time.
Mhm.
I was walking, I was eating, I was taking
Yep.
pictures, doing all my tourist things.
Yeah.
So
Had
I
some
had
fun with
a
it
fun
then.
time. And luckily, it was raining the whole time.
Mhm.
So I stayed cool because that's very important in pregnancy, not to overheat.
Yes.
And so I felt safe. I felt like I could stop and use the bathroom if I needed to. I could stop and have lunch.
Yeah.
And so it was a much slower race and
I
I
feel
felt safe. I felt
I feel
fine.
like people that are trying to do that, like I've known several people that try and do the 50 state thing. To your point, it's not about time. It's definitely about that experience, which I think is a critical mindset to being able to do something like that in pregnancy. Like if you're going out and you're PR person every time, I think that's going to smack you in the face a little bit. If you know first time around or even second time around in pregnancy, it's just not a time to PR. Um,
Yes. And I was one of the youngest there.
mhm,
So because this was a race in Hawaii,
mhm.
I saw a lot of people doing their last state.
Mm,
And I want to
yep.
say there were 3 people in their 80s.
Wow.
So I looked at them and I thought, that's the goal.
Yeah, no,
You know,
to
like I'm only in a small phase of pregnancy, which,
yeah,
you know, it feels like it takes forever, but to
yeah,
be able
that's the
to
dream.
get to a starting line in your 60s, 70s, and 80s, like that's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
And it was just so fun. And you got to see everyone again multiple times on the loops.
yeah.
And I saw one family because they also had a 5K where it was uh, the woman's 50th state,
Mhm.
and everyone in her family and friends were wearing the same shirts. It
Oh,
said
that's so
like
sweet.
Pam's 50th state. And it was just so
Aw,
cute. It was just a party. So it was definitely like, you know, maybe the race you choose is more
yeah,
important than if you can run a marathon.
yeah. No, it's definitely a
Because,
mindset shift for sure.
yes. And I want to say I was only like 3 miles from the nearest hospital, too.
Yeah. So
So
you
that's
were good either
all
way.
very key. Yeah.
What a nice baby moon. I like it.
Yeah. I said, okay, I guess if I quit, I'll just go sit on the beach.
Yeah. No, that's honestly not a bad idea. All right,
No.
to summarize kind of your second postpartum, um, do you feel like in general it went better, faster? Was it more on your time frame? Like what big picture would you say the second time around?
So my pelvis actually felt more achy,
Mhm.
but I didn't have any of the incontinence issues.
Mhm.
I had a much faster delivery too, so that was
Mhm.
helpful. But yeah, I my pelvis just wasn't having it. It running was not comfortable. So I think I had been doing the walking and stuff, but I didn't start running until 4 months postpartum.
Mhm.
And it was a different time of year too. So that was
Right.
the middle of summer. That was when we were all wanting to run.
Did you expect it to feel different? Like, were you surprised or were you just like, all right, this is just what it is this time?
It was a faster delivery, so I was surprised.
Mhm.
But
At what you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, somebody told you tight pelvic floor. Where did that come up in the conversation? Was that after your first or second?
that was after my first. So
Mm,
my second, after my marathon, that was a hard stop of 26 weeks. I'm done running.
yeah.
The marathon was it, and
Mhm.
that gave me closure. I want to
Yeah.
say. And so then I went into a season of weightlifting,
Mhm.
and I had remembered that because I had pushed for 2.5 hours, that a tight pelvic floor was maybe an issue I had
Mm.
that first pregnancy for delivery.
Mhm.
So I was lifting weights and doing hip mobility exercises
Mhm.
all third trimester. And that
Yeah.
was immensely helpful, I think. And so I felt quite a bit stronger immediately
Mhm.
postpartum. And I really had to be because I had a toddler. He
Yes,
was
that's
two
the
and a
thing
half.
that it's in the fine print,
Oh
is they
gosh.
don't
There was no
care.
rest. There was no rest.
No. No, they don't care. They don't care.
No.
Um, so how many marathons as we kind of wrap up here, how many marathons have you finished now since your second was born?
Since my second, the 100 kilometer,
Yep.
I did that at 18 months postpartum, just because I've ticked off a lot of states already.
Mhm.
They're a little bit further out now and
Yeah.
more expensive. So
Yes, they are.
it's easy when you move states.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Now with Javelina, because it's a loop, are you generally looking for more loop courses because it's easier to navigate from kind of a logistics perspective, or just so happens that you're going for just some fun ones?
I'm just going for some fun ones. The loop is 22 or
Mhm.
20 miles. So it's a big loop.
Yeah.
Um, but it was very beginner friendly
Yeah.
because it didn't have a ton of elevation gain. It wasn't at altitude and it was a fairly flat course.
But the temperature
So
was
it got pretty hot. Yeah. So typically their temperatures are like 40 degrees to 80 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And this year it was like 60 to 97.
Yeah.
So it was pretty hot.
Yeah.
But again, I just went to go walk and take pictures and all of that. So I
Did you
felt like with
fan?
the,
I was gonna say,
sorry,
did you fangirl at all? Like, did you get some of the
I
the other people that
did.
were
Oh
running
my,
the?
I was so shy. I couldn't.
I'm like a
I was like,
closet
Mom,
ultra fangirl. I was like, I can never do that, but I think you all are amazing.
I did yell at David Roach
Yes,
because
he
he was
is
going for the
having a
course record.
freaking year, by the way. Like,
And his wife was pregnant there.
she's kind of badass too,
She
by
is
the
the
way, not
most
for nothing.
badass. She was
Super smart. But
Megan
I've
Roach.
they're they're completely changing the game as far as like, okay,
Oh
this
my
is what
gosh, yes.
science can engineer
Yes.
for an ultra marathon. But
It's
how many
really
calories
exciting.
does he take in? Like an hour? It's like 100
Oh
and
gosh.
I feel like it's like 130 or
Yes.
like
Carbs an
grams of
hour.
carbs or something. I don't know. And I'm like, oh my God, you just like might as well just shove a chicken down my throat.
Yeah, and I mean, they've been runners for so long too that they
Hmm.
can take the science but also use their body intuition. So that's kind of the model that I use too of like
Yeah.
you want to be able to hit some of the long runs,
Hmm.
but I would say in like the pregnancy and postpartum space, you're not looking to hit a certain mileage.
Yeah.
You're looking to hit your strength workouts and then also complete some key distance
Yeah.
runs.
Yeah.
But
No,
it's not going to look cookie cutter.
yeah.
I think the longest run I did before Javelina was 16 miles.
Yeah. I think that brings up
Yeah.
such a good point. And actually a decent one to kind of wrap up on is that you're training as a mom. You can still do these races. You can still do this stuff. Just expectations need to shift a little bit, but your priorities, like if you don't like strength training, you need to learn too. Um, and really just be super hyper focused on, okay, what are the most important runs for you to get in? Because you're not going to be able to do it perfectly. It's not going to look like it did in your 20s, but that doesn't mean you still can't do it.
Oh, yeah.
Um, yeah. If you had like one piece of advice for your first time mom self, what would that piece of advice be?
Oh, that's a good question. Gosh. Well, I feel like I did the best that I could navigating a pandemic because my gym did shut down
Yep.
and I think we were all scrambling for gym equipment. So that was just, I am proud of the way I handled it. I did end up quitting my job during that time. I felt like at that time I needed more gym equipment to
Yeah.
get a good workout in, and now I know that I don't. I do a lot of single leg calf raises, the single leg uh, Romanian deadlifts,
Hmm.
pistol squats,
Hmm. We got to get some
Bulgarian,
impact in there for you too, by the way.
yeah, Bulgarian split squats. Like you can do those, and they
Hmm.
help so much with your balance and to prevent injury. So even if you can't get to the gym or have equipment, there is a lot that you could do at home.
Yeah.
Like if your kids are sick and you can't leave the house, there's a lot that you can still do,
Yeah.
especially a lot of the planks and all of that. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's checking the box on you've got to do something besides running, but it very much can be easy stuff to do at home. You don't need a whole home gym or, you know,
yeah.
rack setup or anything like that. So I think a lot of runners who haven't been exposed to strength training, that's such great advice. And for moms, and nice foreshadowing for the future. Hopefully, you've been checking out some of the perimenopause and menopause episodes that we've been posting.
Yeah.
The great news is it's just another low estrogen state. So
Yeah.
you've done the first round. You picked up the weights. Guess what? They're going to come back again. I think we're going to see the same thing with a lot more impact training too, and just trying to get that dialed in postpartum, and then also in perimenopause and menopause, because we want to strengthen those bones, we want to decrease fall risk, all that stuff. So you're just doing all the prep for that. Like you're going to be all ready to
I
go by the time
know.
you get there.
It's still going to be really hard. but at least I
I'm
kind
gonna
of know
let you
what I'm
finish
doing.
these early stages before, like, I tell you exactly how hard it is.
It's
It's hard in
rough.
a completely different way. Whole separate podcast, whole separate therapy session.
Yeah. I will say I did deal with just like insomnia postpartum.
That's low
And
estrogen.
yeah, insomnia,
Yeah.
although that was when I stopped breastfeeding. I stopped breastfeeding and then I had insomnia and loss of appetite. So I don't know if that was depression. It could have been depression, like
Probably
a
depression is
weaning
also a
depression.
depression's also a low estrogen thing too.
Yeah. So that's when I started working with a registered dietitian. I was like,
Good.
I'm
Okay.
wonky and I'm 15 months postpartum. I don't think my OB is going to see me.
No, no, no. No, no, no. So
No.
the summary here before we get
Yeah.
into a deep therapy session here with Cristina is get people around you that know what the heck they're talking about, and we'll deal with one thing at a time.
Yeah. And reach out on Instagram because you might find people there too. It's
Exactly.
fine.
Exactly. Speaking of which, you can find Cristina on Instagram if you want to follow her story. You can find her Cristina times 50. Thanks for reaching out. Like every once in a while I get somebody that's like, hey, I've listened and I really want to talk about my story. And it's such a cool thing because again, like I listened to, I don't know if you listen to Ali Feller's podcast,
Oh, yes.
Ali on the Run. And she's like, from the everyday athlete to the professional, and she's done a lot with the professional athletes. Let's come back and get some more everyday athletes. I like to hear those stories too. So thanks for reaching out and joining me on the show.
Thanks for having me.
If you're navigating pregnancy, postpartum, or perimenopause, whether personally or professionally, check out all our free resources and upcoming courses at carriepagliano.com. This podcast reflects the opinions of Dr. Carrie Pagliano and her guests, and it is for entertainment purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. Always consult your healthcare provider with any medical questions. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a moment to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. And thanks for listening.